How's everybody doing? Good? Good? Everybody feeling good about fall break coming up? Woo! Well, welcome. Before we get started, just a few little things. If you have somebody coming that you want to watch the movie with, the film with, and the seat next to you is taped off, feel free to move the tape to the next seat so you guys can sit together. We just did this for COVID reasons, but there's no worry if you want to move the tape. Also, before we get started with the official introduction, we at Wolfpack Pictures would like to do a land acknowledgement of the land that NC State sits on. We feel like it's pretty important to acknowledge the indigenous tribes that were here before us and the history that this land has. So I'm going to read off a statement that the university released. We would like to honor the land beneath us. North Carolina State University sits on land that was originally stewarded by two indigenous tribes, the Tuscarora and the Catawba tribes. We honor these tribes today by recognizing that this institution of higher education is built on stolen land from those who were here before the colonizers arrived. Additionally, this land has borne witness to over 400 years of the enslavement, torture, and systematic mistreatment of African people and their descendants. Indigenous Americans, since long before their first contact with European settlers, shared their knowledge of the land and its resources and have continued to play a vital role in the development of our local communities, North Carolina, and the nation. We honor these people today and every day by recognizing them in order to break the cycle of colonization and the continued erasure of Indigenous and Black peoples. We must acknowledge the history of the spaces and places we occupy to both understand and unlearn the many ways that we have been socialized. Again, the university released that statement, and I just wanted to reiterate it here. So welcome. Welcome to Wolfpack Pictures' presentation of Night on Earth. Just a little background information before we get started about Wolfpack Pictures. It's a graduate film collective run by graduate students with the assistance of our faculty advisor, Dr. John Stadler. Our goal as a group is to showcase unique and diverse films to the North Carolina State University community, not just the film community, but to everybody in the public. We believe that film serves as a meeting ground of art, history, technology, politics, and economics. Such engagement is not limited to what is on the screen, but extends to where and with whom the screenings takes place. To learn more and to keep up to date with us, you can follow our social media accounts at Wolfpack_pictures. That's Twitter and Instagram. And if you like what you see today, be sure to come back for our showing of Carnival of Souls presented by Josie Torres-Barth, Dr. Josie Torres-Barth, on October 28th. Come see for yourself what secrets an abandoned carnival may hold. During this year, Wolfpack Pictures has decided that our theme is going to be cinematic spaces, coming out of a year of separation, both physical and social, due to COVID. Boundaries of space are felt more intensely. You're more aware of the space around you and the people around you, and what space is being utilized for, whether it's your home office or your bedroom. You think about it all the time. So we thought it would be a prime time to examine these spaces and really think about what space means to us and what space can mean in the context of film. So we wanted to open up questions of globalization and colonization, community building, and film as a document of time, place, and space. So we invite you to think about the significance of space in each film and also consider space, like how it's changed and used throughout the film and how it can be a dynamic thing and it's not always something that's staying the same. So a little bit more information about our presenter tonight, Allison Rose. Allison is a graduate English student on the film and media track. She is a transplant from the St. Louis area, where she graduated from Truman State University with an English degree focusing on classical literature with a film studies minor. Alice's research skews toward the study of new media and video games as emergent narrative tools, especially as used by queer artists. A little bit about the chosen film we're about to watch, Night on Earth. It's directed by Jim Jarmusch and released in 1992, and it's a film that presents 5 different stories, each involving a cab ride and set in a different city around the world. Los Angeles, New York, Paris, Rome, and Helsinki, with each story taking place later and later in the night. Each story is unique, and each story serves a greater purpose for the film. So, like I said earlier, we really invite you to think about the use of space in this film, and the use of the space within the cab rides. Following the screening, Allison will be taking part in a brief discussion with the audience. But because of COVID, we ask that everybody keep their masks on and stay distant from one another. Really stressing this. We also ask that if you haven't already, that you sign in on our sign-in sheet over there. Should anything happen, Dr. Sadler has it. Should anything happen, we just want to be able to contact you if we need to for contact tracing. So thank you for listening to me rant for the last 4 hours. Having said all that, it's my honor to introduce Allison Rose.
Hello. Hope you're all doing well tonight. Is this on? Okay, I can never hear it up here, and it sounds like I'm just talking to myself, but if I am just talking to myself, I suppose that's fine as well. Like this? Yeah. Okay, hello. So yeah, as was introduced in the introduction, I'm Allison. I am a film studies track first year student here. I'm very new to the area. So I'm just really glad to be here to be presenting this film for everyone tonight. In kind of thinking about this idea of spaces that we have set up for this screening series, I think that we tend to think of these spaces as very stable, very like constructed in a manner that we think of as kind of having a consistent spirit at the very least. So I thought that this film, Not on Earth, is a really interesting example of a film where this kind of instability of spaces, the true instability of, buildings being demolished, of social fabrics coming apart, is literalized through something like the cab. And to talk about that, I want to introduce very briefly the director, Jim Jarmusch. And the best way I think to do that is just to kind of let him speak for himself. So I've got a video, but I don't have it pulled up yet. Just like 3 minutes of this longer video that I thought was interesting. Sorry, I should have had this up before. So just before this video, Jarmusch is a really weird person, just a very oddball in the world of film. He is typically thought of as kind of an outsider among the greater film world, and he's really interested in independent cinema, in creating a cinematic world that is not like connected nearly as much to the traditional Hollywood standards that were common in the 80s and 90s. He still writes today, but a lot of his work in the film that we'll be talking about today comes from the 80s and 90s.
David Lynch said that films are the closest thing that we make to dreams. They incorporate almost every other form of expression: music, style, movement, composition, acting, storytelling, writing. They have so many other elements in them that makes it such a beautiful form for me. Well, I have a lot of them that have changed my direction as a filmmaker. As far as my life in general, one big thing for me was when I was very young. I was on vacation with my parents in Florida, and my mother and sister and I went to a drive-in theater, and I saw Thunder Road, the Robert Mitchum film, and that was the first non-Disney type of film I'd ever seen, and it was a wild movie about hopped-up cars and bootlegging and criminality, and I was just kind of it blew my mind. And so that was a big thing for me. I still love that film. Robert Mitchum even sings the theme song. But that was, I don't know how old I was, probably too young for my mother to have taken me there, maybe 7, something like that. But I vividly remember that. And the other major thing, which is broader, is that when I studied, I went to Columbia College, and my last year I was able to go to Paris and study there. And I came back with incompletes in my studies because I discovered the Cinematheque in Paris. And I spent most of my days in the Cinematheque. So there I saw films from Japan and India and classic Hollywood things that I just hadn't really seen before. I'm from Akron, Ohio, and I had lived in New York already, but not just for a year or so. So I'd seen a lot of films there, but that was a huge thing for me. Yeah, I was sitting down earlier today, I looked at this question, and I'm a self-proclaimed dilettante, which means I appreciate so many different forms and things. So to mention some people that inspired me, I made this list a half an hour ago, which would change and be endless, really. So I'll give you a few. Howlin' Wolf, William Blake, Greta Thunberg, Sam Fuller, Lucretius, Abbas Kiarostami, Missy Elliott, Hildegard von Bingen, Frank O'Hara, Francis Picabia, June Leaf, Claire Denis, Gustav Mahler, Anton Webern, Pythagoras, James Brown, Andy Warhol, Patti Smith, Nico, Sister Rosetta Tharpe, Ho Shao Shen, Joe Strummer, Joyce Carol Oates, Naomi Klein, Joan of Arc, Don Carlo Gesualdo, Crazy Horse, Pierre Reverdy, Maya Deren, Billie Eilish, Jean-Luc Godard, etc., etc. But it's really not, I'm not trying to be a smartass. It's just too difficult for me. There's so many incredible things that have come from humans, human expression, that it's sort of limitless for me.
I feel like it's really interesting, this kind of, all these inspirations, this kind of eclecticism that Jim Jarmusch ends up bringing to his films. And we really will see this throughout the film tonight in its vignettes. Every vignette having its own style and inspirations and its own characters and its own language even. So Jarmusch really is interested in kind of all these different explorations of people across the world. And I think with, again, this notion of space, of having something very consistent, we kind of think of it as very unitary, as very unique. But also, like with something like a cab, how many people are riding in a cab like at this very moment? Or how many people are just like me up here presenting a film, or even just watching Night on Earth today, aside from us in this room? The kind of connection that something like the same actions or the same like viewing experience bring, I think is really relevant to Jim Jarmusch in general. Yeah, Jim Jarmusch also has a number of other things that are very common in his work. One of the most important, and one that we'll kind of see throughout this film, is the idea of outsiders, just in general, the theme of outsiders. Not people who necessarily like don't entirely like, not people who are complete outcasts from society, but don't completely fit society's mold. And the notion of putting these people together in different situations. In a later Jim Jarmusch film, we can see this really exaggerated, where in Only Lovers Left Alive, a movie about vampires, we see 2 vampires across the world who were at one point very intimate with one another, and yet as outcasts, they are eventually able to reconnect. And with the cab driver and with the cab rider, we kind of see a similar notion in each of these moments. So yeah, just another thing to keep in mind as we watch this film. So to talk a little bit about the film, this is Jim Jarmusch's 5th film. It was part of a brief moment in the early 90s for Jarmusch, where he kind of stepped away from his more traditional style of filmmaking. Not traditional as in like necessarily like conservative, but just in a more like linear narrative sense. He would typically have, plots with a stable beginning, middle, and end. But we see in this film and the film that came before it, films that are not nearly as interested in that consistent narrative. Don't expect this movie to have any sort of big moments or humongous, like, set pieces or anything. It's a quiet movie, a very stable movie, and yet one that I find a lot of intrigue in. So some things to consider during this film as we watch through it. I would like people to keep in mind kind of how we consider the construct of the cab in general, especially in a world where, as many critics have noted, of companies like Uber, they are kind of having their entire industry destroyed. Those people depicted in the film don't really exist nearly in as much like ubiquity as they did. So this notion as the cab, as this ubiquitous form across nations, is something that we really don't have anymore. And obviously that's not a textual component, but just something to keep in mind. Again, thinking about space, both literally and metaphorically. So thinking about the inside of the cab, how we like construct that in our minds, and how we consider the social actions of, entering a cab and leaving with someone. Jarmusch mentions in another interview this very strong, intimate relationship you kind of have with these temporary figures in your lives. So sometimes at the grocery store, you will share things with people that you want normally in your day-to-day life, and it's very intimate. And yet you'll walk away and never talk to that person again in your life. So he kind of abstracts that to all of these individual cab drivers and passengers going throughout their normal lives, but just this one happenstance in their lives that's fairly unimportant to greater relationships. And sometimes in these vignettes, you'll have moments where earlier events are more serious, more long-lasting, like things that happen in these people's lives are mentioned, losing jobs, relationship troubles, things like that. But they kind of melt away a bit in the cab, or at least they become almost a fraction of themselves. So kind of be thinking about how we mentally conceive of these liminal spaces, like cabs, or classrooms even, or even like a space in here where I'm up here and I'm, going to be talking with you all, and may not talk to people ever again. So definitely be keeping that in mind. Time is another one, really heavy, really broad topic. All of these films take place chronologically at about the same time. And because they take place in different time zones, it will seem like time passes throughout the film, starting from New York, where it's the middle of the night, and eventually getting in Helsinki. I struggle to pronounce that, where sunlight is starting to come in, and you have this feeling of passage of time when, in reality, very little has passed. So those are just things to kind of keep in mind as we watch the film, as well as, again, communication, how we're moving through the world and talking to people, what it requires to actually engage with people. There's another quote from Jarmusch, because he, in this film, he obviously doesn't speak all 5 languages that are featured in it. He's not that, worldly, I suppose. There are people who are, but Jarmusch was not one of them. And he talks a little bit about directing these people without being able to actually speak with them. And despite that, he felt like he had some kind of connection with them. And we'll see that a little bit later on. Themes of either literal or abstracted communication, like Borges, and how people still end up communicating in spite of that. So sorry this has been a bit rambly, but we can go ahead and get started with the show.